Hello friends, so before I sold my vintage glass, I wanted to do a definitive review for myself, looking for a best 35-40mm lens. I have tested 3 of them, in this case the Nikon 35 f2, pretty old but not too old, 2005 or so according to the serial number, and Zeiss 35mm 2.4. This one is very old. This one is, I would say, 60s, 70s, best case scenario. So it is pretty old. But which one is the best? Oh, and the third one is the Sigma 40mm 1.4. Currently my favorite lens. Maybe I have jumped ahead a little bit, but it is what it is. Why 35mm? Quite simple. It's a very useful focal length. 40mm maybe even more so for myself personally, because I like a bit more background separation. But yeah, 35 is a good walk-around lens. In terms of the size, these two win hands down, because the Sigma, as you may or may not know, is about this much and that thick. It's really big, it's massive, it's ridiculously big. And it's a very similar deal with the price. So this one can be bought for about 130, 140. This one is about 90. And the Sigma, if you're lucky, you'll get one for about 450. So 4.5, 3.5 times more expensive than these two. Is it 4.5, 3.5 times better? Maybe. You'll see. Just before we start looking at any of the footage, I must say that if you don't see them side by side, it depends what you shoot, but you might not even see the difference. It's a hard pill to swallow, but that's the reality. When you're already at the full frame, it's a big frame, and these lenses are still primes, so technically they are good glass. Are they Sigma level? No. But they're fantastic alternative if you struggle for cash. And actually, long story short, if I'd had to put a winner, if there is such a thing, then for the value, nothing beats the Nikon, just because it is the least expensive and in terms of quality sits between this and the Sigma. Construction wise, they're actually all quite different. The Nikon probably feels the worst because of the clunky AFD design. Anybody who had the AFD lenses, you will know what I'm talking about. So when you're focusing, you can actually, if you're looking through your viewfinder or LCD and you punch into manual assist, you can see when you're actually going from one direction to another when focusing, the whole image plane is a little bit shaking around. And this is normal. This is actually intended design by Nikon for whatever reason. I'm not a lens engineer yet, so I don't know what exactly mechanism or idea behind this mechanism was, but it is what it is. Is it preventing you to get a nice image? No. Does it feel crap? Yes. Then the Sigma would be the second best because it is really nice modern lens design, but the focusing is still reminiscent of older Sigmas as well, where once you get going, it's fine, it's nice and smooth, but to get going, that initial bite, it still has a lot more resistance than it should be, where Zeiss, it's a classic Zeiss actually, this or the latest lenses, they all share similar type of focusing, because the closest to describe that feeling, I would say it's almost as if you're using a fluid head, a good quality fluid head on a tripod, and you are about to start drag, and it's easy, and it's you can see the resistance doesn't kick in immediately, but just after you start pulling or pushing or rotating in this time. In terms of aperture blades, if that's something that you care about, I certainly do. Sigma has 9, Nikon 7, and Zeiss 6. To be fair, as a bokeh element, when stopped down, I do prefer 6 rather than 9 or 7. If I had the choice, I'd be either as little as possible or as many as possible blades, and 9 is, I would say, the absolute minimum in that range. I don't like when it's 8, 7, 8 or 7. That's it, there's only 2 numbers. But anyway, that's might be my kind of thing, but if you're curious, that's the numbers, that's how they're constructed. And without further ado, have a look for yourselves. I'll roll the footage and compare them all side by side. So there you go. What do you think? Personally, again, I'm sticking with the Sigma for the time being. We'll see. That's a crown that can be easily taken in my kind of book. But a few observations about each. In terms of the negatives, optically, Sigma doesn't really seem to have any. And there is a reason why. It's one of the most modern, most sharpest lenses ever produced in the market. So that's that, apart from the weight. For some people, it might be a really big problem. For me, I couldn't care less. But it actually, if anything, opens up an opportunity for the likes of me to go in and grab a lens that used to cost almost $1,300 and now it's only $400. And if anything, if you think about it, actually Sigma does represent the biggest value. It's a similar deal when you're buying GPUs. The biggest value actually is some of the highest end GPUs because you get the most frames per second. So it is similar in that case, but not really. What I mean is that these lenses, they don't sell retail anymore, so you cannot compare them to and what they would cost if you buy new, where Sigma does. And they recently got even more slashed prices from the original retailed £1,300 or so price. So I would still say Sigma is the king. So in terms of negatives, again, Sigma is just heavy and 4 times more, at least 4 times more expensive than either one of those. But it is optically superior. Now, in terms of Zeiss, it is the worst out of them optically for myself personally. If you are in a project that you might need that out of the box wonky, what's that film was, The Assassination of Jesse James, I believe that's the film. If you need that kind of weird-ish look, this is great because it does have that straight out the box. It's weird. I don't know if it's glass shifted with the age or if that's how they're designed, but basically the edges never ever get sharp enough. You'll see from the images, or you already saw from the images, that the edges are really mushy and weirdly distorted and some other stuff happening. So It's great maybe for some up close and tight shots where you want everything else to have like a dreamy look. So yep, that's the lens for you. Also in terms of color cast, this did the worst because it was so green. I struggled to actually match them. So I tried to match them as even as possible, but not with the white balance. I kept that as it is. And yeah, this is green as hell. So that's about it. In terms of negatives on the Nikon side is the clunkiness. I really don't like this. The focusing mechanism is horrible. I cannot stand it, even though it's nice to play around on your desk when it's sitting there, but in reality it is not nice to be used. But I think it's because Nikon at that time focused on making it autofocus, because it's one of the first autofocus lenses that Nikon made. So I think the priorities were elsewhere. And yes, also not the crazy sharpest, but actually sharp enough. So if you look at some of the reviews that people post about them, they claim that the sides never truly go sharp enough wide open. Actually, I found that to be not as problematic as they say, but it doesn't focus as close as Zeiss. And lastly, the aperture blades, at least they're straight. I prefer, if it's a weird 7 numbered blades, I prefer them to be straight, so they are nice and straight, but it's still 7, and I don't like 7 blades personally. But again, this is just my gripe. I'm sure it has nothing to do with performance. Actually, if anything, probably they are better than 6, but I do like that hexagon type of shape on a background if you are stopped down. And I've actually seen it in quite a few movies that they added artificially, and they go usually for a hexagon shape. In terms of the favorite points on each, I would say Nikon out of the box has the most pleasing color. Is it most accurate? Probably not, but it is the most pleasing. It has those slightly more golden reddish, typical to Nikon kind of tones. Now when it comes to Zeiss, it has definitely the nicest aperture blade count for me, and it also focuses the closest. It can be almost a pseudo macro type of lens. I didn't record too many shots of it being focusing a lot. You could actually not even need macro lens if you're for just general stuff, if you know what I mean. So it does extend quite a long way when you focus, which is kind of creating what's it called, extension tubes effect. I did see that on quite a few Zeiss lenses. I think that's their intended design. And obviously the operation, the lens is so nice to operate. It's definitely the nicest, and it's been the case for every Zeiss I've ever had. Again, that's their design ethos since forever. Now in terms of Sigma, it's a 1.4. It is way sharper, and to be honest, if you want to make that look a bit more vintage, a bit more dirty, then just take a filter, scratch it up or whatever, you know, add more filters. There's a million ways how to achieve that, but there is 0 ways how you can correct a bad, unsharp, mushy lens into something sharp if you need to. So I like to have that option. Also, I must say the color accuracy is on top in terms of Sigma, and overall the image is so incredibly sharp. And when you're buying the full frame camera and you want that full frame look, I know a lot of people will probably hate for me saying that, because a lot of hate is around full frame right now. I don't know, for whatever reason, but it's really subjective, and personally I do enjoy it. I love the nice dreamy type of look and beautiful transition between the focused image and out of focus image, and Sigma wins in that department hands down. In terms of sharpness, the same, and chromatic aberrations, even though it's funny thing, isn't it? I tried to simulate chromatic aberrations on filming the white keyboard and sun shining from the other side, but because the sun was relatively low and the temperature shifted, actually it masks off all the chromatic aberrations, and when I wanted them to produce them, they didn't. But I know for a fact that when I use those two, and if the conditions are unfavorable, I will be sweating, because personally I don't like the color fringing. If I want some color, I add it with the light. I don't want it to be added from the lens flawed design, or not as advanced design as Sigma, where in this case it is a lot cleaner. So there you go, that's my 2 cents. Oh, before I forgot to mention, these are the 2 adapters I use. Zeiss came with the M42 screw type of adapter. Well, I bought the adapter actually. Oh, this is the correct adapter. I bought the connection myself, and then Nikon is very easily adaptable because it's just simple Nikon EF to L mount adapter, and the Sigma has built-in native one. And that's something that some of you may care, that these two lenses are actually not electronically coupled in any way where the Sigma is, because it has a native Leica mount. That said, if personally I had a choice, I would rather have no electronics whatsoever anywhere, because I prefer things to work 100% all the time. And I'm probably a dinosaur, but it makes me paranoid thinking that something can happen and the lens can not work. So I want as least amount of variables as possible. Going forward, I will definitely stick with Sigma for now, but in the future, who knows? I realize I have to say that because I do change my opinion based on what I use, and sometimes you think on paper things are one way until you actually have a project and you go and shoot something and then you realize actually the other one was better. But that's life, I guess. Anyway, thanks for sticking around again, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.